back to Moonli. I hope everyone's having a good week. And today I want to talk about my form of birth control. So I asked you guys yesterday, what did you want me to post about? And because I don't think there's a lot of videos on YouTube talking about this, or there are kind of videos, but their information is not entirely correct. So I wanted to post about it because a lot of girls I talk to on Instagram messaged me about my natural birth control method, and that's what I want to talk about today. So I started my period when I was 10 years old, but because of horrific cramps, migraines, PMS, I started missing a lot of school and swim team. So my mom was like, obviously this is an issue, we need to figure out what it is. So she took me to several doctors, and unfortunately, the conventional medical system just put me on hormonal birth control when I was 11 or 12 just to deal with that. So that's a bit frustrating, but that is the start of my pill journey. And I was on the pill for 13, 14 years, like quite a long time, up until like a year and a half ago, I was on hormonal birth control. And I remember in high school, like later in high school, really questioning the pill, kind of wondering like, does this affect my fertility? And I remember even asking my doctor, and they'd be like, nope, there's no reported side effects, you're fine, you'll come off of it one day and you'll be able to get pregnant, there's not gonna be any issues. And in my head, I was like, well, I might as well keep taking it because I'm not getting any cramps like I was, and the heavy bleeding has gotten better. But then I started college, and as college kept going, those cramps and heavy bleeding started to return even though I was still on the hormonal birth control pill. So it just seemed kind of pointless, but I stayed on it until I decided to start researching about period poverty, where I learned that most of us know absolutely nothing about our bodies, including myself. So as I started learning about the menstrual cycle, specifically with the book Taking Charge of Your Fertility, I realized the power in our menstrual cycle, and that hormonal birth control does not fix our problems. Most of us are on hormonal birth control for cramps, heavy bleeding, acne, PMS, etc. It does not fix that issue. It just covers it up until you come off of it, and then you're like, oh, it's back. So what do I do now? So I decided to get off of it, and by reading Taking Charge of Your Fertility, they kind of call it like the Fertility Awareness Method Bible. So essentially, if you wanted to self-teach, which most instructors don't recommend, but if you do want to self-teach, that is kind of like the book that you start with. I read it for the purpose of learning about the menstrual cycle, not for tracking. And the first birth control method that I used that was not hormonal was Natural Cycles. So Natural Cycles is an FDA-approved non-hormonal birth control method, and essentially it's an app, and they send you a thermometer, and you take your temperature every morning, and you put your temperature into the app. And for a while, I was really happy with it. I never got pregnant. It was able to tell me if I was, if I was supposed to be expecting my period anytime soon. But after using it for 4 or 5 months, I realized that I didn't like the lack of information that I could put into the app. For example, I couldn't put in my cervical fluid changes. I couldn't track if I got cramps in a certain part of my cycle more than the last part of my cycle, or if I could run without cramps at one point and they had cramps in the other. There was just a lot that I couldn't put in there. It was strictly just temperature, and I really didn't like that. So that's when I started looking more into the symptom-thermal method. At this point, I had started following FemHead, and Fertility Charting, and Fertility Awareness Project out of Canada, and that kind of raised my awareness of I wanted to do more. And I think an article done by Jessie, who runs Fertility Charting, I will link it below. She actually talks about why she doesn't recommend Natural Cycles or Daisy as a birth control method, and that is kind of where I decided I'm done with it. One of the things that a lot of people think with the symptom-thermal method is that it is the rhythm method, which is not accurate. The rhythm method is completely separate from the symptom-thermal method. The rhythm method looks at your past cycles and basically guesses your ovulation. So for example, if you have natural cycles, if you're thinking about getting natural cycles, when you have recorded, say, 3, 4, 5 cycles, each new cycle, as you are going through your stages, it'll say, oh, you're gonna ovulate on Tuesday, day 16 of your cycle. And it'll keep that consistent, but the issue is our ovulation changes. That day 16 could be day 20, it could be day 13, it can completely change depending on what has happened that month for you. So that's where I was kind of like, oh, that's not super accurate, and I'm doing this to prevent pregnancy and to learn more about my cycle. And I wasn't really learning anything. So I decided to pay for the course, and essentially now after doing that course, I have so much more knowledge about tracking my cycle. With natural cycles, I just realized I hadn't really learned anything other than that it was telling me I was safe and unsafe, which isn't even accurate. So basically, what do I do with the symptom-thermal method? Number one, the symptom-thermal method, I'm gonna say again, is not the rhythm method. Don't put those two together, they're completely different. The symptom-thermal method is a 99.6% effective birth control method, and I love it. So every morning what I do is I actually take off my little temperature. So this is my temperature, and I used to use a thermometer, like a basal body temperature thermometer that I got from Natural Cycles, but then they came out with this, and this was better. And the reason that I changed is because the basal body temperature thermometer, when you start tracking your cycle, you actually have to take your temperature at the exact same time every single morning. So for me, I had to get up at 5 a.m. to take my partner to work, which means on Saturday and Sunday, if he didn't have to go to work, then I was getting up at 5 a.m. to take my temperature, which is just like, I was just over it. So then I invested in this, and with this, you can essentially, you put it on before you go to bed, and you can wake up at any time and it still gets the correct temperature because you're taking your temperature throughout the night. So this is really helpful. It definitely is a huge investment. Which, depending on who you are and what your financial situation is, can be a pretty big deal. And then the other thing I check is my cervical fluid. So yes, I have not done a video about this, but your cervical fluid is entirely normal. Of course, there are times where cervical fluid is a sign of an infection, whether that's like bacteria, like BV. That depends, you need to go to your doctor, but certain amounts of cervical fluid and certain types of cervical fluid are completely normal and signs of fertility, which is so good. So I check my cervical fluid every single day. And essentially when I'm approaching ovulation, I get egg white cervical fluid for quite a while. Pretty much I stop my period and then I maybe get 2 days without any cervical fluid, and then it just picks up and carries on up until 2 days before I ovulate. That's pretty much what I've noticed is kind of like my body's way of dealing with ovulation, and I love doing it. I know some instructors say that you can check internally. I personally just check externally. I just wipe after I pee or poo, and then I can see whether or not I have fertile cervical fluid, if I have no cervical fluid, or I just have a different type of cervical fluid. And essentially when I'm talking about tracking my temperature and cervical fluid, I have this lovely binder where I put all my information. So in here, I basically just have like the sheets of paper, and I record my temperature every single morning, and I get to also record, did I have sex, did I use protection, did I have a period, which is at the beginning, so that starts up here, and then there's just other data in there you can put in there. I know there's some people that check their cervical position, which if you have nailed that, good for you, because I still have not. Like, I admire people who can check it and understand it. I'm still like working to figure out the difference of my cervical position, whether or not the endocervix has opened or closed. So still working on that. And then I also like to record things like cramps, migraines, like migraines with auras especially, bloating. I personally like to record that, and you can record that in the bottom bit. You can kind of write in what you want to record. You can record it down there. I honestly don't write it anymore because I don't really get the symptoms as much, which is awesome. I just write down little stuff. And yeah, so I love the symptom-thermal method. I wake up every morning, take my temperature, and then throughout the day I just check my cervical fluid, and I record it all in the binder. I also love that I get to have unprotected sex with my partner. So we are told from a really young age that we can get pregnant at any time, but it's not true. If you are sexually active, you can only really get pregnant between 6 to 7 days out of your entire cycle. And if you're not sexually active, your egg that you released only lasts for 12 to 24 hours. So I'm in my luteal phase now, so I get to have unprotected sex, and I love that. I really enjoy it. I will never go back to hormonal birth control, honestly. I think, one, there are so many side effects to hormonal birth control. I just don't think it's worth it. For example, like I said, I was put on hormonal birth control when I was 11 or 12 years old, and I was actually getting migraines with auras at that time. And they have done research to say that if you get migraines with auras, you should not be put on the combination hormonal birth control pill because it increases your chance of having a stroke. No one ever told me that, and I was on it for 13 years. And honestly, the other reason I won't go on is because I've learned so much about my body. I feel so empowered to know where I am in my cycle, why I'm feeling a certain way. For example, I ovulated yesterday. Now I'm in my luteal phase and trying to figure out, why am I feeling more relaxed, more creative, wanting to spend more time writing books and working in pottery? Like, it changes where we are in our menstrual cycle, and I'm benefiting my heart health, my brain health, my bone health, my gastrointestinal system. I love that I know my body, and I would never go back to shutting it off. I know for some people, like, hormonal birth control works best for them, and if that works for you, that's great. But for me, learning my cycle, empowering myself to educate myself and provide you guys with that additional education is something that I feel like I'm meant to do. I really enjoy it, and if you are interested in tracking your cycle, learning how to do it with an instructor, I will link some of the profiles below. Yes, I love tracking my cycle, and I think that everyone should have the right to access it and use it if they want to. I know that's not the world we live in, but I hope one day we get to the point where we don't shame periods and where we don't shame women for coming to doctors about issues with their menstrual cycle and then just told to shut it off because that's easier than dealing with it. We deserve real answers, and we deserve to be able to know our bodies, know our cycle, because they've done trials to look at whether or not hormonal birth control can be made for men, and they found that the exact same side effects that happen for women were too horrible for men, so we're not going to legalize men's hormonal birth control. So that is all I have to say about the symptom-thermal method. I love it. If you are interested in learning more, you can contact me if you just have a few questions. I don't teach, but I will link some teachers below. All right, thanks guys for visiting. I will see you all next week. Bye.